Now, we exist in a society of calculation. And so basically people are gathering information. Okay, they like this, they like this, they like this. So we're trying to make a list and we're calculating, trying to reach a conclusion. You're trying to calculate your way to a conclusion. The first thing I would like to suggest is that in of itself is the problem. You gather data and then you form a conclusion. This is a complete disaster because a person is not data. And if you live with them, they're going to be a person, not a collection of qualities and data. And so you're in trouble. What we're doing is setting up people to find a pleasing aggregate versus a gestalt, to use that fancy language. Like they're a pleasing collection of qualities, but they're not a whole that I dance with. Really what we're looking for is an apprehension, or an insight, as James Wiggy says, where you apprehend that's it. Because if you're calculating yourself to a decision, you can always this, and you just end up, how much evidence do you need? It's ultimately going to be an arbitrary decision, because you can never, at how many pieces of evidence do you start accepting a case? 19, 20, 23, 30, why not 50? Like, shouldn't you gather more evidence, right? So the problem is, it's illogical to gather information forever because you want to be more sure than less, right? And we're seeking certainty as well. Well, certainty doesn't exist. So then we're confused. What we have to do is set up an environment where you can apprehend, not through the noise, where you get the signal, right? Now, what is apprehension? The example I always give, inspired by Nabokov, is imagine you have a bunch of small images and suddenly you see the big picture, like we just had our parallax course and you have a bunch of small pictures and you see the seagull. Likewise, with the FedEx arrow, of negative space, you can't calculate yourself to the place where you'll see the arrow. You don't calculate yourself into seeing that. You just suddenly see it. You just see it, right? But that doesn't mean it's random. Yeah. And likewise, when you get all the small images, and like Sam Green talks about, when you're verbally processing and you're putting all the images on the table and then suddenly you apprehend it. Like you apprehend it suddenly, right? And that's a valid conclusion. Like it's a valid conclusion you reach, but you do it through a sudden insight and apprehension versus a calculation. You can never calculate yourself to seeing the FedEx arrow, right? Ultimately, what you should be trying to do is setting up the conditions of possibility for an insight into an apprehension of that person, or this feeling of just gotten it, where you're gathering up quote unquote small pictures to suddenly see a whole and to apprehend a wholeness of a person, a gestalt, not just parts, right? The whole of a person, a whole person. And the funny thing is, with the gestalt, there's mystery in that. There's always more to be found, right? And the issue is, and I know, this is just what I'll start with, and there's a lot, is basically people are, they're doing experiences to gather information to make a conclusion versus gathering experiences as small images that make possible an apprehension and an insight. And that's a very different thing.
It's kind of like Flannery O'Connor will talk about, like when you actually just describe life as it is, you'll see the symbols already. It's already symbols in that sense. You don't have to create them or add it, pour it in from on top. It's a strong apprehension and this sense of, for lack of a better word, I'm trying to think about the qualities of apprehension that might help too for people, because there's okay, apprehension, okay, kind of get that. What does that exactly mean? For me, it's in line with beauty, it's in line with wisdom, truth, goodness, truly, these are the things of apprehension. And was I going to go with these calculations factors, or was I going to go with apprehension? Though I didn't have that language for it then. But anyway, I obviously chose the apprehension route.
An apprehension of a gestalt of a whole. Then you can build calculation atop of it. That's what Jan talks about. And we say that, when you have an apprehension of a non-rationality, then you can have rationality. It's the order. It's not that one's better or worse. It's the order. It's all about order. The problem is, what causes an apprehension is mysterious, and you can't choose it. So there's an apprehension, and then you can calculate from the apprehension. But if you don't have an initial apprehension, then you have no basis for your calculation, and it's going everywhere, and it fragments, and you can't tell if it's signal or noise or whatever, right? So a lot of what we're describing is the question of how do you increase the probability of a signal versus noise.
Yeah.
How do you increase the probability? You can't have certainty, but you can build confidence. And the longer something sustains itself through time under many, many different environments and circumstances, the consistency would give you reason to believe this is a signal, not just noise, right? So with falling in love, how do you tell falling in love is actually a quote unquote apprehension versus lust or signal versus simply, you know, a certain losing your wits about you, right?
Lust, infatuation, like
stuff like that, right? Like how can you tell the difference?
Infatuation, like
stuff like that.
I'll just admit this is something I experienced where I loved like seeing somebody light up
because of you.
Like it's like, and I guess I didn't think about it so directly, like I'm the reason they are lighting up, but I just like seeing somebody light up. It's really fun. It's like, oh my gosh, they're coming alive. Oh my gosh, like they're smiling, like they're laughing. And when you know, there's something playful, there's joking. When you see that happen, you're like, that's so wonderful. I love that. You know, this is kind of also, you could look up the term, it's interesting, but like limerence is a big part of this too. And I think that what's important to realize is that this is also the mistake of Lucifer. It sounds so strong, but that is, I mean, it's not enough to just like, it's not some altruistic thing to want people to light up. Because, as you already mentioned, which you can overlook very quickly in always thinking the best about yourself and what your own motives, you also are doing it because you are the reason that they're lighting up. So you get to feel good about yourself, you know? So yeah, it's how can you learn to like, and this is where, again, friendship is so key, right? Because you can also like encourage, love, help a friend to light up and be alive in their purpose. Like you can be encouraging. And but see, we want more. Like we have that kind of desire to sort of, it's the possessive nature that we want to kind of have it for ourselves, and we want to be able to do it whenever we want to, and we always want to see them light up whenever we want to make them light up, and all that. And so anyway, I just wanted to bring up that point too, where it's, you know, not simply to be admired, but to see the other person light up, which seems like such a good thing, except that it doesn't have beauty ultimately. But yeah, it can be a perversion because, again, obviously Lucifer is the angel of what? Light. It's about, what I mean to say is like this ability to use another person like they are your source and they are your kind of great mystery of the unveiling of the unknown is a misplacement. You know, it seems so right, and yet it's so wrong, because it's like, oh, isn't that so good? Like you're seeing the divine in the other person, you're recognizing the fact that people are these vessels. Yes, however, if you mistake the vessel for what the thing is that flows through it, you get a complete, honestly, it's just disordered, right? It's disordered, and that's where I think you get a lot of the issues.
Falling in love can be an active apprehension that has not been trained by logos and discipline, and so it's not trained, and so it just latches on to something, and then it actually would need calculation to correct it. This is where, like, actually you need calculation or rationality to check and critique your apprehension, right? So this is where you want rationality, but it's to critique and challenge an apprehension, not to replace an apprehension, right? So, you know, what will happen is someone will quote unquote fall in love or be so sure, but then they actually ignore rationality, which could save them from an autonomous non-rationality and end up in trouble. So you have autonomous rationality, calculation, that's a problem, but then you have autonomous non-rationality, which is just going with your feelings, just going with your intuition and never questioning it, and that's just as dangerous as autonomous rationality, right? So there's the question of if you're apprehending the beauty and the definitive oneness of it. So there's a testing. You have to kind of test your apprehension, if you will, right? So you have to tell. You cannot assume that just because it's an apprehension, it's true. You have this apprehension, but then you say, well, wait, I'm full of self-deception and sin and fallen, I don't really know, then seeing if it's a signal or noise, right? Like the decisions you need to make have a certain sort of apprehension to them. Like they pull you, right? They have a certain sort of thisness to it.
To just see if your apprehension is actually
valid.
Truth, is actually in line with truth, beauty, goodness, is valid.
So if you have an apprehension, you're not calculating to the apprehension. The apprehension has occurred, and the question is, well, is that valid? Actually, you're doubting that apprehension. People act different when they know they're being observed, right? And so, but the signal is found in how they act when they're not being observed. So how do you increase the probability that the person is going to act in front of you and around you as if you're not there? And that's what you have to somehow do.
The point of the matter is that friendship is that space. It is that space where you're saying, you know, when I can just be able to be around them and they don't feel like they have to perform.
If you don't experience them in a non-performative way, you need to observe, you need to experience the person like they are when you're not there.
Yes.
But you have to experience the person. So that means you have to be there, right?
This is Schrodinger's cat.
Yeah, there's literally a Schrodinger's cat problem. Like if you want to get a signal and to actually, because the question is, how do you strengthen your apprehension? Like how do you get more conviction in your apprehension? That's where you have this weird thing where you always knew, but then also the process was the making firm the always knowledge.
Exactly.
And that's really important, but the other reason it's confusing is because our concept of time is messed up. We don't have this Hegelian retrospective time, right? So you have to observe them as they are when you're not there and to get a strength of the signal. But here's the problem. How can you observe them as they are when you're not there? You want to be in circumstances where basically they forget you're there, because that's the truth. Because that's the truth. And like the person has to kind of self-forget, because you want them to act as if you're not there. Well, then how are they going to do that? Because they know you're there, right? They have to get into a certain flow in self-forgetfulness. And the issue is also, this gets into why conversation is a big deal. Because in conversation, you get lost in the conversation.
Yes,
you forget
well, that's
to
the other
perform.
Thing. It is spatially, like, but this is spatially, it's always going to be a problem, right? Because if you're there, you can't see them when you're not there, right? So this is why I think maybe pubs and bars, people think, because, oh, well, we're lost in the oneness of
but you're lost in the drunkenness.
Of the tipsiness, or whatever.
But here's the issue. If you can only enter self-forgetfulness by something external, then you don't have that capacity in yourself. And that's a problem. So it's a simulacra. Like, it requires a certain way of life to get lost in the conversation, to get lost in the experience. And conversation
is such a, like, that's why I think it's such a key one. Oh, you go to a movie, you go here, you know, like going out to these things. Again, they're not inherently wrong. There's nothing inherently bad, but the issue is that it may not put you both in the mode of the self-forgetting.
No, and how do you know you enjoy being with them versus watching the thing? It clouds the signal. Like, it's an unreliable signal. Like, if you're doing things together, then it's not clear you have noise. There's too much noise, right? But we'll talk more about this. Because it's a big topic.
If you have any questions on the topic, throw in the comments.
Put them in the chat. We'll talk about this more, because this is an issue.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you so much.
If you get very quiet with yourself, you will have a sense of knowing. And we could link this to maybe intuition, and that's a big topic. It really has to do with the particular things that I think God is cultivating in your heart and growing you in.